We are the East End girls, the East End girls are we. We do our duty for our country. They may call us common girls, or common girls are we. If it wasn't for the East End girls, where the hell would the East End be? There you are. There you are. There you go.
This community film showcases the rich heritage of our city, the development of the East End and Garths, and the richness of the characters and people who lived here. The East End of Sunderland houses some fantastic hidden history, some of which we hope to uncover as part of the Canny Space project. During the summer of 2015, we worked in partnership with Sunderland Library Services, local organisations and local people who kindly shared some of their memories with us about living in the Garths and the East End of Sunderland from 1938 to 1995. On the 21st of August 1935, Sunderland Health Authority approved a scheme for the proposed redevelopment of the East End by building approximately 500 flats at an estimated cost of £210,000. The census shows that over 70,000 back-to-back houses existed in the city, and conditions were terrible, with overcrowding, outside toilets and problems with vermin. A major slum clearance programme, clearing more than 3,500 dwellings, took place with the rehousing programme, providing new homes for more than 1,000 people. The word Garth is interesting. It originally meant ground used as a yard, paddock or garden, derived from the old Norwegian word gard to the English word Garth. In total there were 7 Garths: Wee Garth, Burley Garth, River Garth, Walton Garth, High Garth, Covent Gardens and St Patrick's Garth. Now sit back, relax and enjoy the film. Built in 1826, the Welcome Tavern remains at the heart of the East End and continues to be a focal point for the community. Local publican Jeff Moon shares some of his earliest memories.
And I'm a resident of the East End, have been for the last 52 years. I was originally born in a street that no longer exists, called Lucknow Street, which is in the heart of the East End. I lived in that dwelling for 6 years. That dwelling was a tenement house, one up, one down, tiny little room with the big old coal-fired ranges. Our toilet facilities were in the backyard. Even in that time of destruction of the rest of the city, down the East End was still quite poverty-stricken. Our cold water, our water supply was in the backyard. We had to go down and fill your buckets or your pans or whatever it was. And round about the age of 6, we moved into Burley Garth, which was quite a shock for young people like myself, and I had a younger sister at that time. We had indoor plumbing, we had a nice coal fire. The rooms were decidedly bigger and warmer, and free from a lot of the little rodents that used to run about in the old tenements. The Garths were quite a big breath of fresh air and have been a part of the East End since sort of the beginning of the war, the 30s, and it was a big rolling programme from local authorities and housing associations to do the slum clearances which blighted the area and which were probably synonymous throughout the country, not just in the northeast. Throughout the country it was acknowledged that the Sunderland area had some of the worst slums in the whole country.
Martin kept us laughing for over an hour as he shared fond memories of bonfire night and other highlights of growing up in the Garths as a young boy, including tales of his evacuation during the war.
I was born in Harley Street, just round the corner. I was born there, and I watched them pour old Hartley Street down and build the flats. Early Garth.
Fantastic. What year were you born?
I was born in 1931. I think I was 8 or 9 when I moved into Burley Garth. There was 4 tenants in before us. We were the 5th tenant.
Wow, so you're a really...
There's 134 flats in that Garth. That's what it was.
What do you think was the best thing about living in Burley Garth?
I was going to get out. Later on, you know, when you think you go 4 floors up, you know, there's a lot of stairs. You have to carry your own coal up, you know, carry your bike up. And that was the only thing with them, really. They were kind of little houses. To say what you moved out of in the old town end, you know. See, there was a lot of tugboat men lived in the flats. And there was one family, and she used to sell Willix. You know, I mean, kids in them days, you know, you buy Willix. You would call it Wilkes, you know. And they'd sell fish. There would be blokes. Some of them would get tugboat men would get fish. Would sell that, you know. Or a lot of them, because you were good neighbours, you got your fish for nothing. But, we used to go down the old fish quay, and the foreign tugboats, fish men would come in, and they would say to us, do you want a shilling? Well, I meant shilling, you know, it was a fortune. And the 3 of us had to go down in the ship's hold. They'd get the fish out, and we'd have to get all the ice that was left. Put it in buckets, and you pull it up, and one be on the top, dumping the ice in the river, you know. But what fish was left in that ice, you could take home, you know. And that's how you lived right. You passed. If you got too much fish, you'd give to your neighbour, and you know.
We've heard some great stories about pets in the Garths. We've heard a story about somebody keeping a horse.
A donkey.
A donkey?
It's Buick, I think it was called. It was a Buick. He had a coal horse. He was a coal man. And he had this mule, that's what it was, called Ginny. And he used to shout out in the veranda, stop where you are, Ginny.
What, he kept in the flat?
No, he didn't. He just kept in there, not in the house.
Because somebody was telling us they kept it in the sitting room. We're trying
That was
to
a
say
goat.
It was a goat.
That was a goat. How was that now?
So you have lived in the Garths during the war?
The what? Yeah. Yeah, there was a siren on the top of the bar when it went off. Yeah, they all run.
Did people go into the area shelters? I've been told a lot of people actually went onto the roof.
The area shelter, a lot, there was area shelter in the middle, but the main area shelter was down in Havelock Street, where I used to run down there. And during the air raids, some of the young men would be on the roof watching for the airplanes and that, you know. 3 of us, one got away, and me and my best friend, we were fined 5 shillings for singing in the street. Them days, pubs closed at 10 o'clock, you know, and we were 17, you know. Because I was 17, we got my name in the Echo. It was brain under, you know, and they were fined 5 shillings, because we're being well known in the town, eh? Everywhere I went, he was "Are you going to give us a song, Martin?" I couldn't walk down High Street, down Coronation Street. "Are you going to give us a song, Martin?" It's my fondest memory of the town end.
Getting arrested.
I was wondering when that was going to
Oh, I'm glad you shared it with us. Can you remember the song you were singing?
Yes?
Do you want to give us a song?
No?
At aged 86 years young, Pat is our most senior contributor. She shared tales of wartime and working, and her comments were key to inspiring the original song, Do You Remember? Written and composed by young musicians Shannon and John from the band Yuma. Pat and Martin are related. They are brother and sister. Did you spot the similarities?
I had to go and stay with my grandmother if the sirens went, to take her down to the area shelter. You know, I can remember. And she'd always she'd run a boot club or something. And the Savaletti bottle, I can remember that.
Where was the shelter, Pat? Was it in the Garths?
It was further down, it was behind the Garths. Copied where that mission was. There was another mission, and it was just past there. It was a flat ground underneath. Underneath you went. And there was a lady lived on the other side of that Garth. We called us Salvation Army Lil. She was in the Salvation. And our Martin followed her all over the shelter with her, carrying jugs of milk and water if anybody wanted a drink. Mm-hmm.
What was it like in the shelter? Was it scary and
Well,
dark?
let's stop that, or Cleveland. Huh?
Was it scary?
It was. Don't know, just got on with it. My grandmother used to laugh at a man that lived beside us. He was like an attendant, you know what they call it. My father was a warden, ARP. ARP man, a warden. My father had to walk from Burley Garth up to Edenvale, and he got as far as Binns. And when he got to Binns, he said to his pal, he was going to stand in this doorway. He says, they're in sentry bombs, dropping like pennies. And when they stood in the doorway, he said, we can't stand here, it's all glass. And they come out, and that'd be at Edenvale to work, you know, to go out. They used to, all right, rescue squad, they were. And you know, I was evacuated then, and I was evacuated. Martin and John and I were evacuated. So we were at a little village called Garths. It was between Seaton Crew and the Transporter Bridge. Every time I see the Transporter Bridge on the telly, I said, I used to go on that bridge every Saturday. The lady who I stayed with, and the other girl stayed with, she used to take us over to visit our mother in Middlesbrough. And I said, I've travelled on that every Saturday. But there was a big evacuation, you know, it was quick. And I can never have any trouble with the people in the Garth, you know. People say, oh, the town end, the villains, you know. And I can never remember any fighting, anything going on in the Garth. No. You knew everybody on the veranda. The first one was Robinson. We were Brennans, Taylors, Tivenants. Goffrey, Mr. Goffrey, he had a sweet shop in Coronation Street on our way to school, Coronation Street. And I came home from the evacuation, and I'd never been home I'd been to 3 different houses. I'd been to Graythorpe, East Whitton, Yorkshire. We had to move from there because the teachers had to go back. They need them in Sunderland. Then we went to Crook. And when I got there, the oldest girl said, oh, I'm taking you to the pictures tonight. And it was the first time the Wizard of Oz was on. And I cried my eyes. And the reason I cried my eyes out, I didn't want to stay there. I liked where I was staying before.
We met Arthur and Jane in the library, and they shared some early memories of childhood, school days and East End characters.
And my grandfather was like the 6th person in, and he was given the choice of where he wanted to live, and he chose the top veranda.
We were on top.
Were you? Well, that's what he
I was
thought.
wondering how many people, if they were given the choice, how many people would have chose the top.
His idea was there was no extra traffic.
I would have thought so as well.
No,
You would have had the views, you would have been quiet.
And that's what
These are the back verandas here. Because the front verandas were continuous all the way around. The back verandas, you had your own veranda, which usually, well, no, you didn't. Sometimes you shared it. So your back door might be there and 2 windows, but some of them had 2 back doors on, and half was yours and half was somebody else's. And my mum, so these windows or your back bedroom windows.
Yep.
My mum used to stand out on a half tile and hang onto the frame to clean the outside of the windows. Again, as a child, I must have been in a permanent state of fear because I'll be watching her like a hawk and I'd see the wash leather coming out. And I used to go in the bedroom with her because I was so terrified. I don't know what I thought I was going to do as a child, but she would stand there and cling on, open the window.
Just, you know, just looking and imagining.
Oh, well, as I say, we were on the top veranda, and she used to do that.
My mum and Mrs. Mum called Mrs. Jenny used to make 22 cakes every Christmas, and everybody got a cake, Christmas cake. And she didn't like one person, but she still got a cake.
People stayed down there.
What kind of cake?
There'd be people down there.
Christmas cake?
Oh, you know, like
Fruit.
Fruit cake. Oh, that's really kind of your mum to do that. So was that their Christmas present from your mum?
Probably. Can you remember, I don't know whether you remember what my coal strike, Pitman strike. Couldn't get no coal anywhere, so what he done, he nicked on the, you know, the scaffold, the woods on the scaffold, nicked one of them, he had it on chairs. And he just put it in as it was burning.
Really?
Obviously, I had like some of them was, like Burley Garth was square. Garth had like a big opening where they had the mission, and a lot of families moved into there and they lived on different verandas and on different sides, and basically that's probably where the East End got its real community spirit. I know, you know, they go back years prior to that, you know, say how sort of poverty ridden like communities always stuck together. Well, yes, they did, and they do now. It's because they have a common denominator between them, that nobody has anything. However, I think that the real community feel of what we say the East End really derived from the Garths, because of the geographical shape of the buildings. Everybody faced on everybody. Everybody knew who was who, and like I say, everybody. You had family that all lived, you know, within walking distance. You could visit 6 or 7 very close relatives within an hour. Where nowadays, you know, you got people that live all over the country. So that's where the breakup of the communities really comes from. But now, you know, so you look back and you think, God, my auntie lived there, my nana lived there, and everybody had relations that lived 2-3 doors. Jubilees, the coronations, you know, VE Day, all those sort of celebrations were all done. You know, where they're all. You know, numerous stories of everybody putting a candle around the verandas and lighting it, you know. And obviously that was before my time, but I could imagine, you know, how it looked, you know, a dark night. There wasn't street lights like we have now, and everybody, you know, 200 odd houses putting candles all the way around the verandas, you know, it'd be quite nice. And this year that the community spirit sort of continued all the way through that I saw, even when we moved in until sort of the late 80s, was still quite apparent down here, until, you know, working conditions changed, people started to get a bit more money, and people started to aspire to move out of the area, be homeowners. The local authority or the housing associations decided they would modernise them. I think that was a catalyst for the change as well. It made people move. Even though they didn't want to, it was like, you know, because people tend to get stuck in one place and stay, so they made them move by the very fact they had to for the restoration to take place. They moved them from one side to the other in a rotation, but a lot of people had made the decision, you know, I'll just move and I'll move to a different area, and once they moved, they settled and never came back.
Tony popped in to visit Holy Trinity one day, and he ended up being part of the film. He has a direct link with the church and shared funny stories of his time as an altar boy.
So did you used to live in the Garths?
Yes.
So which one did you live in?
Well, yeah, my mum and dad were born in the Garths as well. I wasn't born in the Garths, I was born in Southwick, and I moved down here when I was 6.
I'm the youngest of the family. I've got 2 brothers and 2 sisters. But I'm 45 in August, 23rd. And I was altar boy from 1977 when I first went to St John's at 7-year-old. And straight away I was altar boy. I used to carry the cross or spray the frankincense. Someone carried the cross, 2 people carried the candles, 1 person carried the bread and wine. There was 5 or 6 of us all together. We used to get changed in that room there. What was it, that one?
That be the one straight forward?
Yeah. We used to get changed in there. We used to put our white gown on and then our red gowns over the top of that. It was great. Right? And New Year's Eve, you could come out of that one house and go in another house and just walk in because everybody knew each other. Parties were unreal.
So in the squares where the Garths were?
Yeah, we used to play football in the Garths or cards till 4s and 5s o'clock in the morning. It was great.
People have told us about, they've had like candle parties and that everybody used to light the candles around the Garths or something like that, or jazz bands and things in the
jazz
Garths.
bands and that used to be, well, the East End Carnival, that was gone for years and years and years, and loads of jazz bands, the fair and the Noah, you know what I mean? And that was gone for years, and then I think it stopped about 96 or 97, I think. Because mainly the Garths, they're all big families. Like my ma, she's got 7 sisters and 4 brothers. My dad's he's only got 2 of each. But like there's 5 of us in our family. My mum's dead now. My dad's still alive, he's 80 this year. But everyone knows like the Loughlin's and the Sloans. My ma's maiden name's Loughlin, and she married my dad. And the Arnott's, you had the Arnott's, they were a big family, they lived in the Garths, where you go off.
So down there? Tarzan?
Aye, Tarzan's still down there. And that's Paul. And that's Lisa Dunn. The Dunns is from down here as well. I don't know who that is.
Teresa Rennie, is that?
Oh, that's Teresa there. Yeah, she's there now. So that's the same person.
So that's in Wegar.
And that would be the Jubilee, that would be, aye, the Jubilee.
77?
82 was the Jubilee.
Yeah, 82, you're right, 82. 1982. So the Buntons out, so...
Right.
Did you have a big party?
Oh, I know class. Even when Lady Diana got married at the party. There's only I go off. It's called Bollywood House now. That's got the veranda's still the same, you know what I mean? All the other Garths is knocked down. Big miss. There was Burley, Weir, Walton, River, Coffin Garden, St. Watts. There was 7, I think, 6 or 7.
What do you miss the most about the Garths?
Playing football, and everybody knew each other, and you could leave your kids out, and there was big lights, so it was all lit up. You could leave your kids out till 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night. They would be safe. Everybody looked out for each other, you know what I mean? That's what I miss.
How can we ever get that back? Do you think we can or not?
I don't think we'll ever get that back. It's like it was the community of like Berlin where you go off, and the new houses. Like everybody knew each other.
Julie shared her memories of growing up in the Garths. In her words, she is a real Garths bairn. She talked until our tape ran out, and her stories demonstrated just how resourceful she was as a 3-year-old, with tales of mud pies, Yorkshire puddings, and hiding her pants.
Hi, I'm Julie Maven, and I lived in Weir Garth, essentially, from 1969 to 1986, apart from 1 year when they were modernising, and I lived in Burley Garth in 1979. I've actually written a book, a 182-page book called Jam, Butty and Bottle of Tea Bairns, basically a recollection of loads of memories of different people my age and a little bit younger, have grown up in the Garths in the 70s and early 80s. We reminisce about things like games we used to play, people that lived in the Garths, all characters such as old Emily and the Mulvaneys, if I'm allowed to say the name on camera, but there you are. And just things like when kids say they're bored nowadays, and I think, how can you ever be bored? We were never bored. There wasn't one of us fat, well there was one, I'm not mentioning any names, but the rest of us were all really skinny because we were running around all day tormenting old folk and playing games and running around the Garths. We never had time to be bored, and that was essentially why I wrote the book in the first place, because I was sick of hearing kids say we're bored, and I thought, as bands, we never got bored. A few of the lads whose dads worked in the shipyards, as mine did, worked on the fish quay. So whenever we wanted anything like rope, because we made swings, our own swings, or just things to play with, like old bits of tin. You wouldn't believe what we did with old bits of tin. Our dads would bring them, and there was lads like Ian Swinnow, whose dad had a fishing boat, and the Moles, and they would get the big thick rope from the fish quay, tie it on the top of the archway in Weir Garth, from the second veranda down, a stick on the bottom for a seat, and then we would tie a rope to the end of it for everybody to pull like a big tug of war. Sit somebody on that stick, I don't know, we didn't kill ourselves, pull them right up and then leave go, and your backside used to touch the top of the arch. That is not an exaggeration. Anybody that's been on that swing would tell you it's worse than the death swing or the double death swing at Derwent Hill. And we played on that for hours and hours until some cantankerous old biddy on the second veranda would cut it down because of the noise. Usually our backsides banging off the floor and we couldn't hear the telly. So they would cut that down, we'd just put it up again somewhere else, or tie it round a lamppost and be swinging round lampposts all day, or off the bottom veranda. Then, once we were bored with that, or we'd had enough of it, we used to climb over the little roof, we called it, which had a shelf underneath from the first veranda, climb off that and drop, see who could drop. None of us had any broken limbs from dropping off the wall, I've got to admit, and we used to love it. We used to hide under it. Now I have a real fear of spiders, and now when I come to think of it, there must have been hundreds under there, under that little lip. But we did always play on there. And we had the muck hole. The muck hole was my favourite place in the Garth. It was just myself and my best friend at the time, Colleen Taylor. We used to sit there for hours, running in the house for water, and we used to nick spoons or forks or knives, anything we could, lolly sticks, if we couldn't get cutlery, to mix the water to make mud pies. And then, if we couldn't get water, if our mums kicked us out, one of us, you know, usually would need a wee by about 11 o'clock, so we'd just go a wee in the mud and mix that in. And the poor kids that we used to feed the mud pies to, well, we didn't tell them the whole ingredients of the pies. On the morning when I come out number 18, there was a drain pipe right there. I'd take my knickers off, tuck them behind, 3-year-old, you know, play about, wee until my heart's content, get called in, slip the knickers on in the house. And Colleen Taylor's mum told me dad what I was doing. He said, hey, Ronnie, she hasn't weighed herself for days, man. She just went out, she puts her knickers behind her. She's still weighing, she just isn't wearing the knickers. Another game that we used to play quite a bit was Catchy Help or Catchy on High, or it was just like chasing everybody around. It was, I would say a catchy kiss, but none of us ever really wanted to kiss anybody. So we just used to play Catchy Help. And that just consisted of everybody, all the kids, fleeing everywhere. Somebody was man, poor person who was man, because it wasn't limited to just in the middle of the Garth. You could run anywhere. So we were up on the verandas and the little roof, everywhere. This kid who was man had no chance of catching anybody really, unless he was like Usain Bolt. And none of us were. We were fast, but not that fast. So we used to play that for hours on end. British Bulldog. We used to, or Lamperoy we used to call it, play that in the middle of the Garths. All the team games that, like, people on the estates, I wouldn't think would have the room to play them in roads and streets, where we had this big open space in the middle of the Garth, where we could run round all hours. So we used to play Lamperoy, Catchy on High, Catchy Help. Then there was knocking 9 doors, where you would just knock on anyone's door and run away. But I used to get wrong for that, I'd get grounded.
kick the biscuit tin. Queen Hugh's got the ball, put a ball in a pair of your mum's tights. But for goodness sake, God forbid you took quite a new pair that you'd only had on about 6 times, because you would get into big trouble. We would never be in the house. Sometimes our mums would shout us in to get changed, or particularly if it was snowing or raining. But essentially we were out from morning till night, going back in for meals if we wanted them. Sometimes we'd just have a sandwich or a packet of crisps, just run out and still play out. And in the summer months, when it was, you know, the light nights, we'd be out on a morning. Quite often, a few of the mums and their families, because the dads were always at work, would walk over the bridge and down to Roker Beach, sit there, have a picnic, come back and then sit out. And the likes of Pat Jones and my mum and Margie Greener, quite a few of the women, Violet Little, sorry, my mum always called her Violet Clayton, all used to sit out with the kids, and we'd sit for hours until it must have been about 10 o'clock at night, and then we'd all be back in, and the next day the same, never in. I can never ever remember going shopping with my mum, or, you know, to the town for shopping. We always were just, oh, will you look after them while I just nip up to Lipton's or wherever, and we just stayed and played. We never were hanging around our mother's skirts when we were kids. In the snow we would be in the house more, simply because we had to change our socks, the ones on our hands, not the feet, because we didn't have the beauty of gloves. We just used to wear socks on our hands and get some bags or a lid off somebody's bin, or some people had sledges if the dad knocked one up at the shipyards, and we'd be out on the Fish Quay bank all day in the snow, coming in to change your socks, and that was it. You never in. Then in the Garths, the characters in the Garths, in Weir Garth, there was one particular old woman, I can never remember her surname, but she was called Old Emily, and she lived on the top veranda near the moles, and she was always round Doreen Swalwell's house, who was my friend Karen Weatherly's mum. And one day Old Emily was sitting, and she used to swear, but she used to say shacking instead of the F word. So shacking this, shacking that, everything was shacking. And this one day she said, "Hey Doreen, where's that shacking budgie gone?" Because Sparky, Karen's beloved budgie, had stopped squawking. Anyway, Old Emily got up to return to her flat, and poor Sparky was sparked out, suffocated. She'd sat on him. That wasn't very good. We had to bury him in the muck hole. Beginning around about the early 80s, a lot of families started moving up to the estates. I think they wanted gardens, or they wanted a bigger house with an upstairs, and quite a few families kind of moved out of the area. The Greeners, the Richardsons, there was quite a few. Ourselves, we moved. And then obviously in the early 90s there was the regeneration programme for the Garths, in which they were pulling them down and rebuilding. But a lot of the families from the Garths, I found, still stayed in the area, were moved, decanted from the Garths into the newer houses. And a lot of my oldest friends are still down here. So even though I moved in 86, a lot of my friends still lived in the Garths. So I was quite often down here visiting Sharon Prest, the Prests, Julie Jones, quite a few who I would still keep contact with. And at this day, these people are still living around here. And although I didn't live here, I had very strong connections to the East End and kept involved with places like Chance, which is where I now work, as a board member and as a user of the centre. I always kept one foot in this camp and another in Southwick, where I lived as a teenager, and then ultimately moved all over. I moved back down to the East End myself with my partner at the time, and then we bought a house in South Shields, so we didn't live here for very long, but we were in the area. And it was quite nice to see that a lot of the old families, I mean, on one part of the Vines, in a row of about 3 or 4 houses, you've still got all the little sisters who we grew up with. They're still all there, and I just think it's a place where memories are made, but lives are forged, and people still live here. There isn't a lot in the area, but it's a place that's full of spirit and still has that community feeling about it when you come down, which is great.
Jeff took us on a tour of the local area, pointing out many landmarks along the way. Can you recognise any of the places we visited?
This was an entrance to the Garths. This was Weir Garth. Weir Garth was more of a horseshoe shape, but in the centre of it you had the mission, where we used to go for hymns and stuff like that. And as a kid it was mainly for school outings or Christmas parties. We used it, and then as you got a bit older you used it to climb on and hang around. But it was basically the entrance to the main Garth. It had two sides that you could enter to. Used to have gates on, but once again they were all taken down for the war effort. The street corner behind us is the bottom of what we call Hartley Street, and it marks the end of the Garths. Down here we had the Garths at the top end of the East End, but this was the end of Weir Garth, and the Hartley Street led you up to the top where it met Lucknow Street, which was the corner of Burley Garth and the start of a different area for as how we would see it was our Garth and their Garth, and there was quite a little bit of a rivalry used to go on throughout the year, and it was always who had the cleanest Garth in the early days, because the women used to literally scrub the steps with a white stone and keep everything absolutely spotless, and great pride in the houses that had been given, considering they came from the slum clearances that what they had prior to that. And here we have River Garth and High Garth, which they've been slightly modified over the years just to bring them up to date, but they are the last surviving structure which was predominantly the Garths that's left standing. They've actually managed to survive the bulldozers up to now. And as you can see here, we have the last remaining Garths and the verandas, which is what we used to run along. Once again, these have all been modified to sort of fit modern day living and to make them look more pleasing, I suppose. However, if you remember well, we did discuss about the candles. This would be the type of thing on the top. You can see on the rails, all them would be lit up with candles on celebrations, whether it was VE Day or some sort of Jubilee or any celebration within the East End, because the East End people took great pride in grasping anything that they could sort of celebrate, because the type of lives they lived was more mundane and hard-working people, and so when they needed to party, they embraced it wholeheartedly. And we're standing here now. This is what we call Donaldson Gardens, which is built on the old, well, actually would have sat directly on the old St Pat's school, which was in St Pat's Garth, which was one of the largest. As you can see, the distance between each road, this is by far the biggest Garth out of all the 7 that we had, and it had a big sort of Catholic school, which was St Pat's, like in it, and Donaldson Gardens sits right on where St Pat's School would have actually been. This land behind me here is where Coffin Gardens used to stand. Coffin Gardens always confuses people because every other building in the area, which was the Garths, was always had the Garths name or title to it, where this one was Coffin Gardens. It was quite a small, very personal Garth, if you like, where people felt a real sense of community within that particular Garth. As I said before, each Garth had their little peculiar ways and had their rivalries in a good way, and this was no different to the Garths, Burley, Weir, St Pat's, High Garth or River Garth or Walton Garth. and they felt the ownership because it was such a small little dwelling. We stood here on the corner. This is Prospect Row and this is Hartley Street, and the building that you can see behind me is a care home now, which was formerly the site of Burley Garth, which is where I spent a lot of my youth growing up with a lot of my family. And the Garths have been pulled down quite a lot of years now, but this site has been built up. It's not in exact form of the old Garths, but the height is pretty similar, and a lot of people who belonged in the East End have kind of commented. It's a little bit of a marker saying this, like, actually this was where Burley Garth was. I think Burley Garth was not the biggest Garth, but it was certainly the second and most popular Garth out of the 7. It is a shame that it's all gone now. However, as you can see, progress has to be made, and we have a lovely facility now to look after maybe some of the old folk that lived in the Garths many years ago. Can come back down, and if they're lucky enough to get in a spot where they maybe lived and have that view, it will evoke a lot of memories and bring a lot of things back to them.
We spent an enjoyable morning with the Year 6 children from Hudson Road School. As part of their local history studies, they have enjoyed learning about being a child in the Garths in the 1970s. They have looked at old press cuttings, maps and pictures and decided to make their very own Garths. Barry took us on a trip down memory lane, sharing some fond memories of visiting his grandparents.
Who's this?
So I click on this.
Jimmy Kelly.
Jimmy Kelly.
Jimmy Kelly was my father and my father and my Uncle John's best friend. Jimmy Kelly. God. They came from Ireland as well, I'm sure, the Kellys. There was a big family of them, and Jimmy Kelly was my father's friend. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird, eh? The Kellys were a big family down there, like the Kilties, the Moans. Oh, there was a lot of families at the time. Now that might be, yes, that'll be the same. That'll be where my nana lived there. And I remember they had cats. They had a lot of cats, right? And believe it or not, the cats used to fall off the ledge and land on the feet at the bottom, and I couldn't believe it. You go, oh, because there was a lot of pigeons used to come and land on the landings there. People used to put bread out for them and that. And my uncle Johnny, who lived with me nana and my granddaughter at the time, he never got married, he lived there all the time. He used to put bread out, and the cats used to watch the birds come and land. It was dead funny. And they would try and latch onto the pigeons, and they would go, you just see the cat just disappear over the ledge, and you'd run outside out the door, and the cat would be sitting on the bottom shaking its head and making its way back round to come back upstairs. They didn't get killed, I don't know. That was weird. That was absolutely weird. Right, Amanda, one great thing about the old East End for me, or the town end as my grandparents would say, the old town moor and that, was when you came down the high street, right, and you were away down to your nana's and you were watching the clock because she had sweets for you and all that, the amount of people who would stop me father and talk, they all knew each other. Whether they were coming up the town, up the high street bank to go shopping in the town, and others going down. So this is like first thing on a Saturday morning, we'd be going down the old East End, and my father would be talking to all these blokes, and by the time you got round to the Garths, we probably spoke to about 20 people. All knew each other. Hi Joe. Hello Paddy. Because he got called by the Joe Paddy. You know, and they'd be talking about this. Who's these the boys? Aye, son, and all this sort of thing. Before you even got your nanas. So the feeling of like everyone knowing each other, the feeling of community was there. Once you got on the veranda, you went up the 2 flights of stairs to go up my nana's house, you'd be looking over and shouting. Everybody knew each other. They'd be shouting across the verandas at each other, or shouting down at the kids, Bobby, get a hat of him, or something like that, you know, this sort of thing. Everybody knew each other. My nana would often walk up the town at the 80 odd year old. She was 93 when she died. She would walk up the high street bank not get the bus. I think the number 6 used to run up there. I can't remember now, but everybody knew old Lizzie, you know what they call her. And she'd walk up the bank, and often she'd get into opposite the Caledonia and get the, I think it was the Salvation Army, and wait for the bus to come down the bank. And many times she would say, you know, Bobby's picked us up, or somebody who might have had a car, because not many people have had a car. They've picked her up and brought her down and that, you know. But the friendliness of people, that must go back to the times of when a lot of those families, like I say, had come into the area from Ireland and from other places, and all knew each other's clans and that. And it was such a very clannish community. I mean, we're talking about the colliery areas now. If you go to, you know, the old Corryhetton and Easington and that, how the pit villages were very clannish to each other. Yeah, because they all worked the pit and all lived in the same streets. The old town end was like that, and it was very clannish, and all knew each other. They all went drinking together. Street parties all went in together. They all mixed in. You know, Mrs. Smith wouldn't see Mrs. Jones down the street without anything. They would go and give each other pans of broth or help each other out, and it was a wonderful spirit of things. Didn't have any money. You know, a lot of poverty down the East End. People, you know, probably didn't have good clothes and stuff like that. But what they did have, they had the spirit of the old town end, and I think that's what made the town later. You know, people will talk about that being the Barbary Coast over at Weymouth or up at Bishop Weymouth later. But the old East End had this uniqueness about it, and it was a unique area, and it really was. And you know, as a kid, we would come out with Nana sometimes, and my father would want to go along Hendon Road. And we would come up church walk past Holy Trinity, Trafalgar Square. I used to be amazed at Trafalgar Square as a kid. I used to love architecture, and I used to look at that and I used to think, this is great, this. And the old church, Donaldson School. Then round into Coronation Street, you'd find the old jail still there. It's gone now. You know, we should have had that. That should have been still here. And St. Pat's over the road. You know, Roman Catholics as we were, coming from Ireland. Our church is gone. You know, which is sad. But the community spirit from it all was wonderful. And didn't matter if you were a Protestant, Catholic, whatever. Everybody mixed in together. And football was always the topic and main theme. Everybody knew my father because he played for Sunderland. I knew Paddy, and you get in football and that. And everybody knew my granddad because he played for an old team called Royal Rovers. He was a gateman at Roker Park for 50 odd years, 54 years. So everybody knew them and everybody knew each other. And they were really lovely people, and I think that's what's made Sunderland evolve the way it is now. We've become a bigger city, but from those days it all started.
We hope you enjoy listening to these real-life stories from over 50 people who contributed to the making of this film. Some who did not want to be on the film, but still shared their stories, spanning nearly 60 years.
Do you remember when we were kids not very tall? We'd run riot and drive our poor mothers up the wall. You lived on the top veranda, you had to walk up all the stairs. Didn't matter 'cause when you got there, the view was beyond compare. We learn, with it we understand. Life has no meaning when you take memory by the hand. Do you remember the cup final back in '73? Everyone chipped in a quid, the whole community. celebration like no other, a party in the streets. All the moms put on a picnic with crisps and poppin' sweets. In a youth we learn, with age we understand. Life has more meaning when we take memory by the hand.